Hey all, hope all is well. This is another video in the Road to Grandmaster series. And in this one, I'm going to be covering my round 2 game from the Charlotte GM Invitational from January 2019. This is my second round game. And if you saw the first round game, I made a draw with white in the exchange Slav against Grandmaster Vladimir Belis. And I had the really good fortune of being white for a second time in a row. Now, normally when you're playing in tournaments and whether it's an open tournament or even a closed tournament, it's very rare to get the same double white. And white is an advantage because it's almost like having the first serve in tennis. So it's a really good opportunity to get a decent position from the jump and play with some advantage and kind of force black to sort of equalize. So I was hoping that I can make a more of my opportunity of with the second white game in a row and put some pressure on my opponent. My opponent is someone I know very well, Alexander Ostrovskiy. He's been a mainstay in New York City chess for years, and I mean we kind of came up together. Now I'm a little bit older than him, but we both sort of played each other many times over the years. We both played at the Marshall Chess Club coming up, and yeah, just a really good guy. So um, even though I like him, and I think we have a decent relationship. I'm not someone that offers draws or you know plays differently, whether with playing a friend and or someone I know well, and this was no different. So, in any case, I played d4. Uh, Ostrovskiy played knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3. I knew that Ostrovskiy's, for the most part, is either playing the Nimzo or the Ragozin. Those are some lines he really favors, but he tends to play knight f6, e6, d5. And then sometimes he'll play the Nimzo. So, anyways, he played bishop b4, which was a little bit of a surprise because I thought he tended to play the Ragozin for the most part. So, a little bit of a surprise for me. The Ragozin, by the way, is a very sharp line, and a lot of theory there. Typically, it continues, well, what I did, knight f3, and then actually d5, and this is the beginning of the Ragozin. It's a very aggressive line. Black is arguing that this pin here on the knight is going to feature very prominently and allows black to get pretty active development, castle really quickly, and then rip open the position with c5. So very interesting line. Now, my opponent's pretty well versed in these lines, and I kind of wanted to test him elsewhere. And I decided to play e3, which is really tepid. Not the most ambitious, but my idea was sort of to just get a position. So anyways, castles was played. And now here I played bishop d2, which is very unusual. There are lines where white will play bishop e2 or even a3 or something like this. But bishop d2 is very unusual. Black played c5, kind of breaking in the middle. And then I actually played d takes c5, which I believe is a mistake. I think it would have been smarter to play a3 actually. And in this position, I actually secured the two bishops right away because after a3, bishop takes, and I just have the two bishops. Black may consider a move like knight e4 and then get my bishop back, but then I can play rook c1, and I think white might have a little bit of an advantage here because if you take like this, I could take with a rook. Maybe I have some active pieces. I'm not totally sure, but it seemed interesting. The issue with d takes c5 is then after bishop takes c5, my bishop on d2 looks very bad. And the issue is the bishop on d2 also, in addition to being a little bit misplaced, blocks the queen from influencing the center. So you can pretty much imagine a knight coming to c6 and a pawn going to d4, and my bishop on d2 not being well coped to deal with that break. So I played rook c1, trying to trying to have some of my own plans to deal with this potential break in the middle. Note that the bishop on c5 is a little bit loose. So I was thinking I might be able to take tactically, and then my rook would be uncovered and snack that bishop. So after rook c1, black played queen e7, which I think is a very good move. Just getting the queen to protect the bishop, Also, the queen is really well placed on e7, really nice and snug there. Can't be harassed by my rook at all, or anything like that. And in some lines, the rook might come to d8, and then again influence this file. So I thought that was a good move. And if you notice here, I'm actually behind in development, which is a real issue. So anyways, queen e7, I played a3. And the reason I did this is actually something that I've mentioned in one of my previous games. I can't recall which one, but a few rounds ago, actually, I think in my in the last Bay Area International, I talked about the idea of wanting my bishop to go to c4 in one move instead of two moves. Because what can happen is you could go bishop e2 and then after they take on c4, then it takes two trips, and I didn't want to do that. So what I was trying to do with a3 was make a useful waiting move to prompt black to capture on c4. Oh yeah, I do remember the game. It was against Nikhil Kumar. If you've seen that game from the Bay Area International, I played this. I tried to make some waiting moves to kind of goad black into playing d takes c4, and ultimately I wound up having to play bishop e2 because I didn't have any more useful waiting moves. Now the idea with a3 was that in addition to being a useful waiting move covering the b4 square, I also entertain ideas of playing b4 myself. And that was the idea. So after a3, black played knight c6, wisely ignoring my b4 threat. And I actually thought, okay, b4 is going to be annoying, but the truth is when I played b4, I actually weakened the a3 pawn quite a bit. And just my queen side in general, almost like my first round game in this tournament against Vladimir Belis, where we saw in the Exchange Slav I played a3 and b4, and my queen side squares were loose. Now I do have a rook on c1 here to give the knight on a c3 coverage, but still it's a little bit of weakening, especially when my king hasn't castled yet. So those are some things to think about. So I wound up going b4 anyway because I was like, you know what, I want to justify the situation, but I didn't feel great about it. So after b4, black went bishop d6, and then I took on d5, which is kind of controversial. Again, I could consider playing there's some issues with the other moves. Essentially, I thought c5 would be interesting, but at c5, black just goes bishop c7, and it's not so clear what this pawn expansion really did for me. And now black can prepare e5 and d4 and bust open the center before I'm ready, and sometimes even play e5 and e4, and then all of a sudden black would have space, and the bishops would have crazy pressure on these diagonals. Wow, I need to get better at drawing these arrows, but. Another plan would be to play bishop e2, but again, I wasn't keen on, wasting the half move like that. And then actually, after this pawn is exchanged, black is already ready to play a5, and you could see again that now I wish my pawn was back on b2 because my whole queen side is coming apart, and I'm not ready for it. And note, by the way, that if I played b5, sure, this is a one-move threat attacking my knight, but attacking black's knight, but after knight e5, this type of trade was probably fine for black, and again, my queen side is kind of weak. So that's pretty much the problem. So anyways, because of those factors, I took on d5, and I thought this was the lesser evil, but this also has its dangers as well, because essentially what happens now is even though black gets an isolated pawn after e takes d5, the queen is bearing down. Already d4 is a nasty threat because my king is pinned. And you could just see that the opening for me was kind of a failure. So after e takes d5, I have to address this threat. So I played bishop e2, just temporarily blocking it. And black played a6. I thought a6 was a mistake and pretty unnecessary. I was actually expecting a move like bishop f5. Just kind of bearing down on this diagonal. I was also, I just thought, I was thinking that rook e8 might be interesting. I don't know, I thought a6 was kind of unnecessary. Even though it's not a bad move, I didn't think b5 was a legitimate threat, because again, if I push b5 here, look at how bad my a3 pawn is, and the knight just moves away anyway. It doesn't seem like I gained much. And again, you can see this bishop on d2 is woefully misplaced. I mean, it'd be so much better on this square. So those are kind of like the dynamics in the position that you can see I'm woefully behind in development. So anyways, a6, I castled. Finally, nice to get my king safe, but again I still have some problems here. And now black played bishop e6. Again, very reasonable move, developing the piece. I would prefer f5. I think it's a little bit more active, but bishop e6 is fine. And now I actually played b5. It's a little bit strange because you're saying, well, you could say, well, Kassa, what are you doing? You said that weakens the a3 pawn. But I was just looking at his position, and I didn't see very good activity for me. I really was initially considering a move like knight a4, trying to get my knight to c5. But the issue there is now black goes knight e4, and in this line, the knight controls the c5 square, and well, it's just not clear to me what my next move is. And my bishop on d2 is also pretty bad, and black can get the two bishops if they want. So I wasn't really keen on allowing this. And so I really wasn't sure what to do, and I was a little bit nervous because, again, black's moves are very easy. Black's next moves could be rook a3, bishop f5, h6 potentially, rook a e8. And, I would love to make luft for my king, but even playing a move like h3 is dangerous because maybe black goes queen d7 and then sacks on h3. And I just didn't see good ways to improve my position. Another idea in some lines is actually to play knight e4, believe it or not. And the idea with knight e4 would be that actually after a potential capture on the square, black would get more space on the king side. So I know these are a lot of arrows, but again, you can see how black has a lot of all these interesting active plans, and my bishops on d2 in particular, but also e2, just aren't really doing very much. So anyways, I played b5, and the idea was as a pawn sacrifice. The point was that after a takes b5, which happened, knight takes b5, I was willing to give up the a3 pawn to get a little bit of some more control on the queen side and to secure the two bishops. So what happened was bishop takes a3, knight takes a3, rook takes a3, and it is true that, black's just a pawn up. But I thought that now I have the bishop pair, which is known to be an asset, and perhaps with my bishop coming to c3, it may have some influence on this diagonal. My last thought was that maybe this d5 pawn that's isolated and could be a potential target, and this d4 square, the d4 square, I'm really bad drawing arrows. The d4 square, there we go, actually could be a real blockading square for me and just give me some type of advantage. I did recognize, however, that black should be better here. The idea was that it would give me some activity in a position where I wasn't having much. So anyways, after rook takes a3, I went bishop c3, continuing with that plan. Black went knight e4, very logical, trying to target my bishop, challenge my bishop there. And I went bishop a1. The idea was just to keep it far away from that knight. And in some sense, I didn't want to necessarily play bishop b2, which you could say is a move you could consider, because I really did not like the fact that this rook a2 would be very annoying. And I'd probably have to go rook b1, and I just didn't like it there. It just didn't appeal to me. The other thing that I had to be very careful of is that if this bishop somehow had to leave this diagonal, this diagonal, there's also knight c3, which is a really nasty fork. So I kind of want to keep the bishop far away from the knight. So yeah, so bishop a1, rook a8 was played, and then I played knight d4, trying to get the second part of my plan, which was using the d4 square to effectively blockade and get some control. And I felt pretty good here. I thought that I'd done well to kind of shore up my position here, because at least now my pieces are a little bit more active. And so, I mean, if I get one of these pawns for free, I mean, I know it's not hope chess, but let's say I got the b7 pawn or the d5 pawn, white would have a massive advantage because I have these two bishops really active, and this one on the long I'm so bad at arrows. The bishop on the long diagonal, is an asset. So rook fc8, bishop d3, again, getting my other bishop going, working on the diagonal. This is funny. These arrows are really killing me. And after knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, I have both my bishops in good spots, and I've effectively blockaded the d5 square. And what that also means is that this bishop on e6 is not doing very much. It's kind of like a fat pawn. So bishop takes, and now f6. f6 is a move I underestimated, and it's actually a very, very good move by black. The reason for that is that you blunt my bishop on d4 so that it's not doing very much in this diagonal anymore. And you have a situation where this knight is kind of blocking this bishop. So my bishops are somewhat neutralized, even though they have really good squares. I did think though I had reasonable play though, even with this in this position where I'm a pawn down. I thought I have enough compensation, but no more than that. So after f6, I played h4. The idea was kind of to create some type of weakness on the other side of the board and to give my king a luft. So my idea was like maybe one day if I got h5, and h6, I'd kind of force this pawn to make a decision, and then all of a sudden my bishop would have scope again. So that was kind of the idea there. Maybe not the best way to play. I mean, I maybe could have considered a move like h3, which is more tepid, but I thought that, I still was thinking I was playing for something, even though I'm a pawn down. Sometimes my ambition gets the best of me. So after h4, black played another pretty good move, I thought, which was queen d7. Just kind of ignoring the h5 threat, and also actually kind of dealing with it, because if I play h5 now, black could kind of just play h6, and maybe tactically bishop g4 works. I'm not totally sure, but maybe it works. I don't know. I'm looking at f3, bishop takes h5. There's still this pin on the d1 queen, and I'm wondering, g4 looks so dicey. It's hard to believe it works, but maybe it does. No, it doesn't. There's no way it can work, because of rook takes c1, and now this sacrifice should be pretty good. I don't know. There's even this move. It's so complicated here. It's really tough to say without like hardcore analysis. And if you haven't noticed, I do these game analyses on the fly. Try to stay away from the computers, at least when we're talking about the game here. So anyways, I mean, I guess maybe I could take on c8 first and then go g4. But again, still very unclear. Tough to say what the evaluation is. My spider senses tell me black should be fine here, honestly. Maybe a move like queen d6 is enough for perpetual. I'm not sure, but it feels a little bit strange. So so I thought h5 was risky, so that was one element of it. And the other thing that's kind of clever about it is that this bishop, which is not really on e6, which is not really doing anything right now, maybe it comes out to f5 and then has some influence, because now the queen on d7 is actually protecting the pawn on d5. So interesting. So I played rook a1. The reason for that was I kind of didn't like the tension here. I didn't like the fact that my queen could just be forced to take on c1 at any moment. And I thought in some lines it may be more important to get some play going on the queen side. I thought these might be where my play is on the A and B file, so I was trying to shift gears there. Rook takes A1 was played. Queen takes A1. This was the other thing I liked about it, is that now this knight coming to C3 is not a possibility. And even in some lines, I was thinking there's a possibility of a sack on F6. I know it's not realistic now, but there's some positions where I thought maybe it's possible if the knight got dislodged. But here black played knight d6. Again, another pretty good move in my opinion. And maybe hinting at the exchange operation of bishop f5 hitting this bishop on d3. Because at least we notice here that this pawn is blunting my d4 bishop. And so this is the one that really has scope right now, the d3 bishop. So the idea of maybe exchanging those could be in black's favor. Alternatively, we talked about these open files on the queen side that were somewhat of an asset for white in terms of getting counterplay and just making up for the pawn deficit. And this knight coming to c4 would potentially shut off another file for me to play with. And so that was something that was of serious concern because, again, if this knight gets to c4, I don't really want to take it because then black would have two connected pass pawns on d5 and on c4 and b7, the d5 pawn going to c4. So I was realizing here that like I really did not have full compensation and that black had made a few really good consolidating moves to kind of just argue, hey, you are a pawn down. So I played queen a7, trying to stay as active as possible, even being a pawn down, because I mean my activity is kind of would be my saving grace. If I'm not active, then black can kind of get the pawns rolling, start pushing this pawn up the board, and then we'd have some real problems. Again, this knight coming to c4. Now if black pushed the pawn, like let's say b5, I might continue to like kind of eye it, harass it, bring this rook to b1, and make it very, very difficult to get it going. So the idea wasn't like to necessarily trade queens. It was just to kind of like keep an eye on things and ask black, hey, I'm playing here too. So after queen a7, black actually did play b5, and I played queen a5, and then black played bishop f5. And this was a move I kind of expected because, again, it's consistent with the idea of challenging this exchange operation, trading these bishops, and getting something going on the queen side. And I went bishop e2, declining that trade because it was clear to me that I need to keep my bishops on the board to get the compensation. And then black went bishop g4, challenging my bishop again. And I thought, you know what? I could play f3, but the thing is, I'm down material, and if I create f3, that is creating more potential weaknesses. And, particularly on the g3 square, the e3 pawn might be weak. And now that the bishop has vacated g4, this knight might wind up coming to f5. So I actually was a little bit worried about f3, bishop e6 back, and then at some point, this knight coming to f5, this h-pawn being a problem, this bishop being a problem, and black being able to exchange in a clean way. So because of that dynamic, after bishop g4, I actually just went bishop d3, and then black went back bishop f5. I went bishop e2, bishop g4, bishop d3, and my opponent actually claimed a draw or offered a draw with bishop f5, saying bishop f5 is going to be the next move, and of course I had no choice but to accept. Kind of an interesting game, somewhat of an anticlimactic finish, but I don't think it was appropriate to play on because I'm a pawn down. Really playing on means that I weaken my king's position or wind up trading those light squared bishops. And the two bishops really were the brunt of my compensation here. There's a little bit of disappointment not taking advantage of the double white. And really just that my bishop on d2 early in the game just was not where it, should have been. So in any case, it is what it is. And I had started with 2 draws. Well, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please like and or subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the Road to Grandmaster journey, please do make a donation in the description below. Thanks. Have a good one.